helped you out. So again, I really just want to kind of go through the process on that regard. So the next one is find f of x, graph f of prime of x. So let's go ahead and do a cubic here. So let's call this f of x. Like, what would the graph f prime of x look like? So there's a couple things that we need to understand. Like, remember, here's f of x. This is kind of like your, distance, right? Distance or position, your position with respect to time. So if you're thinking about it that way, you can think of this as your position in respect to time, whereas f prime of x is going to be the rate of change of the position with respect to time. So there's a couple key points that we want to make sure that we understand from f of x, which we call our maximum and minimum. So as we're reading this graph from left to right, you can see what's happening here is this graph is going ahead and it's increasing. When we get to this relative maximum here, you can see that instead of it's increasing, now it's going to go ahead and decreasing. So the rate of change is changing from a positive now to a negative, right? Then it's going to keep on going down till we get to this relative minimum, where then it goes ahead and change now to positive. So again, you can think about this as like the position, and here's time. I'm sorry, that would be wrong axis. Here is your position, time. Okay, so you can see it's going up, then it's going down, and then it's going up, right? So if we're looking into f prime of x, basically now we're looking for like the rate of change or the velocity or, whatever may be the case with respect to time. So again, here, what's happening is from at this interval to this interval, we had a positive rate of change, right? It was increasing. So therefore, let's just call this like -1. Let's call that 2. So from -1, we have a positive rate of change. And then at 2, we're now going to be a negative rate of change. So that's going to be down from there. And then from here, now we're going to go ahead and increasing, right? You can see that as we're decreasing, now we're going back to increasing. So now it's going to be going back up. Now, that was going from f of x to f prime of x, right? Your question was, well, how do we go from f prime of x to f of x? And again, this is something that you're going to take some practice. And I remember spending a lot of times like actually taking a whole lesson and going through this with my students. And I just don't recall some of like those key points that I wanted to make sure to remind you of. Because I do know this is one thing that a lot of students had trouble with. The best thing I can remind you of, and I think that was probably from point is at least just understanding like, well, these, which we call our critical points, right? Well, basically those critical points are going to be your extrema, right? And if you can just think about these values is representing the slope as either positive or negative, then you can just kind of go from there back over to there. Or obviously in your equation, you had the equation, you can actually just find the antiderivative and then go ahead and graph